Hi, welcome to the video. My name is Dychronic, and today I'm taking a look at my top 10 PvE specials in Destiny 2. And of course, for this video, I have made a spreadsheet with the DPS calculations, which can still be found at my Discord, link in the description down below, on the channel #SpreadsheetsTalk. And as you probably know, these spreadsheets and these videos are not possible without the support of my patrons on Patreon. And as this is one of those very slow seasons, this is the one where I really do need your help. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. On screen right now, this is my spreadsheet. Again, with a dark theme, color-coded pictures, recommendations, and of course, all the DPS calculations here on the right side. And as always, let's go through the different categories of weapons so you have a better understanding of the meta. Up first, let's talk about the glaives. And I would say most people are not a big fan of the glaives. I'm personally not a big fan of them, as obviously their DPS, total ammo damage, is very low. But obviously, glaives are much more utility. Firstly, for that melee. If you scroll all the way here to the top, you can see that the actual melee has a pretty good DPS. Row 34, compared to a lot of these top dogs, is pretty respectable. Obviously, melee is going to be infinite ammo, but obviously melee is dangerous. Beyond that, you can also protect yourself with a shield. And to that, I would say, do you know that swords have a block button? Because I bet most of y'all didn't know that and don't even use it. Although both the shields of the glaive and the sword are actually very useful, especially if you have high levels of defense. But really just not enough to make me want to use them over a lot of other options that do really good damage. Up next, let's take a look at the sniper rifles. Now, in general, other than the exotic snipers, I would like to say that snipers are not very powerful. And outside of artifact mods, you're probably not going to see them very often compared to so many other long-range options. When it comes down to it, their total ammo damage is pitiful, and their DPS is even more pitiful. And obviously, a lot of this has to do with the fact that you have to get headshots because they have like a near 4 times or 3 times crit modifier, and obviously they're much more long range, so they're very safe and actually good in the highest level play, but just not good enough to make me want to use it for the amount of ammo that they have. When it comes down to the legendary options, I find that the best is going to be the aggressive frames, not the rapid fires for the DPS, because most of the time you're not going to be able to achieve that level of DPS, but the 72s, because they are an achievable DPS and they also have the most total ammo damage, which is often more important. Beyond that, for the exotics, obviously we have the Izanagi's Burden. At number 9, a very deserved spot, although it did drop a bit because linear fusion rifles have just become the go-to option and serve a very similar function. We're not seeing nearly as much Izanagi. The DPS is uncontendable. Very, very high up for just 5 shots, honed edge ×4. You're doing a lot of output for a special weapon. Beyond that, Cloud Strike was pretty close to getting in the top 10, but just missed it. Back in my day, there were no legendary Treswaffle. Up next, in the next category, let's take a look at the trace rifles. And I would say, in general, trace rifles are usually considered to be slightly higher damage auto rifles. And, well, frankly, not many people use auto rifles in the first place. However, a lot of the exotic options are very unique, each one doing something a little bit different. Something like Divinity at number 5 is going to be the most popular trace rifle option by far. And so much so, they've considered nerfing it because almost every DPS phase, almost every GM has a Divinity, not only for the overload rounds, for the weakening a target from range, and creating that very easy crit spot. For the most part, the bosses in DPS these days are designed around people using Divinity. Every single one of the world's first races, they all had Divinity. Divinity is a go-to, is a must-have, and they might nerf it soon, but probably keep a lot of the similar functionality. Other than that, Aegir Scepter is also worth considering that with the super activation thing, you can get nearly the highest DPS and full ammo damage in the game, which is pretty insane. But you're also consuming your super, which may not be worthwhile, and on top of that, it creates a bunch of stasis effect and slowing effect from that super thing, which is very useful for stasis shards and fragments and slow effects, and for people using a stasis subclass. That being said, I've found in my Grandmasters with this, I have to run out of ammo very quickly because I'm not using it as sparingly as I would with other special ammo weapons. So it just didn't pan out as one of those cool support weapons. In the next category, let's talk about shotguns, and you may be surprised to see shotguns this early, considering their DPS is some of the highest in the game, and they're also one of the most easy to use and understand, and they literally are. I am not refuting that whatsoever. And honestly, I see a lot of people using these in mid and high level content all the time, but in the highest level, Grandmasters or special master stuff, you're not going to be seeing a lot of shotguns because melee range is very dangerous. But when it comes down to the shotguns, there are a few that definitely take my interest. First of all, I still find that these slug shotguns are my favorite to use, especially considering how much range advantage they have. They're a little safer in the higher level play, and if you get used to them, getting those headshots is going to be something that happens more often. And we also still do have a lot of options, although unfortunately, I don't believe any craftable options. Other than that, I also really like the lightweight frames, which still have some of the best DPS for shotguns, especially with my CQC-12 that I've had since Season of the Worthy, and a lot of new options as well, including, I believe, craftable options like Wastelander and Without Remorse. Which both of these shotguns I find to be a nice middle zone of fire rate where, you know, the aggressives are a little too slow and the rapid fires you fire really, really quickly. And of course, their total ammo damage is nothing to be snuffed at. When it comes to the exotic options, Lord of Wolves and Duality still perform very well for DPS, although their full ammo damage is a little questionable. And Lord of Wolves will probably be even higher on this list after they undisable it so I can finally test it. Moving on to the next category, we have the fusion rifles, and a lot of these are performing very, very well. When it comes down to the legendary options, the rapid fires still take the cake in almost every single way. They have the highest full ammo damage by a lot, they have the highest DPS by a pretty significant margin, even more than the stasis options. If you don't know, the kinetic slot options usually have more damage. And we still have a lot of great options, things like Cartesian Coordinate or the Likely Suspect, which is a craftable option. And we also have a kinetic slot version, Riptide, which has Vorpal or Frenzy, making it a good DPS option. And truly, the only downside to having a rapid fire over the other options is you don't have as much range. But the range you have from rapid fires is enough in most scenarios. When it comes to the exotic option, at number 8, we have the Bastion. Obviously, pretty good DPS, pretty good full ammo damage, pretty good range actually, and built-in unstoppable rounds, making it a good Grandmaster, Master Nightfall stuff, or high-level stuff that make it a go-to pick for consistency over the seasons. And as I've said many, many times before, a special ammo, exotic, intrinsic champion weapon is something you're gonna want all the time. Other than that, at number 10, we have the Merciless, a weapon that many of you probably don't use, but has unquestionably high full ammo damage and DPS. Even without the max speed, it's still outputting some of the highest DPS in the game beyond most shotguns in the game. Moving on, in the next category, we have the special ammo grenade launchers. And honestly, it's one of those weapon types that I feel a lot of people are overlooking, especially the lightweight frames, which I find to be a little bit better than the wave frames. Although the wave frames have gotten better since they've doubled the distance they travel, I still find the lightweight frames have a little better DPS and definitely a lot more total ammo damage. I find that the wave frames are essentially just a fodder killing weapon, and I don't need that as I have a primary weapon. The lightweight frames have a good mix of being able to hit AoE, being able to hit long range, being able to hit around corners, flush enemies, and a lot of ammo, and really good ammo economy and really good full ammo damage for their kind of weapon. And of course, the cream of the crop, we have the Wither Horde. I believe the highest total ammo damage weapon in the game. I believe among all of the heavy weapons as well. Especially after Anarchy got its nerf, I think Wither Horde is the king as a special ammo weapon. And if you play Grandmaster Nightfalls, you know that total ammo is gonna be a huge thing, which is why we don't see Fourth Horseman in Grandmaster Nightfalls. Even though it has a lot of DPS, you run out of ammo too quickly. Wither Horde, incredible damage, being able to hit many enemies at the same time, being able to tag targets as they move around is just way too good. And on top of that, the Catalyst gives it auto-loading, which I have not manually reloaded a Wither Horde in so long. Auto-loading just makes it so much better. Which, fun fact, initially I didn't like Wither Horde because it felt so clunky and slow reloading. It just felt bad to use. The Catalyst flipped it completely. If you don't have the Catalyst, you will be surprised by how much better it feels. And finally, at number 1, we have the Arbalest and the Ariana's Vow. Pretty much the same reason as before, it just has the intersection of so many qualities that you want from weapons. First of all, it has the range to hang at long range and middle range for both of them. It has built-in barrier rounds between seasons as a special ammo weapon, is highly useful. It has pretty good full ammo damage and DPS for weapons that are supposed to be much longer range weapons. And of course, Ariana's has auto-loading, which I absolutely love, and Arbalest has that Genesis shield disrupt thing for doing extra damage with a kinetic weapon, which it is a kinetic weapon. I'd say the obvious differences between them is that Arbalest depends a lot more on getting those headshots, so Ariana's is more forgiving, and Ariana's does have that damage perk if you can keep getting headshots, and is a lot better at close range while still being adept at long range. But keep in mind, one's kinetic, one's energy, one doesn't have to be better than the other, they can just be brothers. And of course, just wanted to give a big shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Specifically, a big thank you to Mom, Dad, Monday, Super Parker, Super Panther, Casey Reagan, Rockers, Clever, for their support on Patreon. And that's it. Hope you guys did enjoy. My name's Dychronic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.